Hello, all, and welcome to Essence of Wonder. Very happy to have you here for another show. And today we're going to host a show about election security and foreign interference. With me today, I have quite a few people, but hosting this particular panel will be Bryson. Hold on, we're having technical difficulties. We're going to have to restart in a few seconds. Another Zoom issue today around recording, just sharing what's going on.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, all, and welcome to Essence of Wonder Live. Today, we're going to actually be streaming also to Clubhouse, and I'm pretty excited about it, having discovered the platform very recently. We are going to have a show about election interference and foreign interference and hacking elections and all of that. Joining me right now will be Bryson. Hey, Bryson, please join me right here, and you will be introducing very soon everybody else. But first, I do know for a fact that other than introducing you as an awesome person who has done a lot of really interesting things, and you run SCYTHE and other interesting things in security that I will just not mention because you're just so cool, I did hear, as an alternative introduction, that you actually sing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Gadi. And I'm not going to do it right now, although I knew you're going to tease me about that. So this is an attempt where it is a metaphor of moderator interference that's happening right now from a foreign country in Israel by Gadi Evron. That was well done. But I'm not going to be deterred from my task. Today, we are going to pull back what has happened on foreign interference in the U.S. election. Democracy rests on a couple of principles: trust and transparency in that system. And anybody that messes with that system undermines our ability for a smooth transition and reflecting the people's choice. With me today, right hot off of the presses from HBO and Georgia, is Harri Hursti for his introduction.
All right, my name is Harri Hursti. I have been hacking voting machines and researching election security for the past over 15 years. Back the day 2005, I was in Tallahassee and showed how in the Diebold voting machine you can change the outcome of the election. But this has been a very interesting ride, and I'm very happy that we are finally starting to have a bigger conversation and more fact-based conversation about the risks and vulnerabilities we need to mitigate against, and understanding how fragile our election system is.
Matt Masterson, fresh out of CISA and maker of Killer Cincinnati Chili.
Yeah, thanks, Bryson. Matt Masterson. I led the election security work within the Department of Homeland Security for the 2018 and 2020 election, and now out of government, working at the Stanford Internet Observatory, experiencing academia. And I agree with Harri. I'm glad we're having discussions around risk, security of the infrastructure, and steps we can take to build trust with voters.
Returning to the show again, SJ.
Hey there. Oh, gotcha. Hey, SJ Terp. So I lead the Cogsec CoLab volunteer group. We connect and scale disinformation responders. So you might know us from the behavior models we've done, cognitive security research, or responses. Current working on disinformation as a risk problem and how to build disinformation SOCs.
Maggie.
Hello, I'm Maggie MacAlpine. I've been working in election security on and off with Harri Hursti for about 10 years. One major projects, including the DEF CON voting machine hacking village, work in various states on their integrity. And most recently, I've become part of the Cyber Reason team. So here I am along with my cat Pippin.
And David.
Thanks, Bryson. Dave Imbordino is the NSA election security lead for 2020, also co-lead of something we called the Election Security Group, which was the NSA Cyber Command joint effort for securing the elections. It's great to be here today. You know, NSA and Cyber Command were kind of the away game in terms of the U.S. government effort focusing on foreign adversaries. But very close relationships with people like Matt and Bryson throughout the year. So great to be here.
David, we're gonna start with you. So, what did we see in 2020? What happened exactly when it came to foreign interference?
Sure, thanks. I would say we break it up into two different categories. So foreign influence and then foreign interference. So interference refers to more of the cyber components of an adversary campaign against our election. And influence referring to more of disinformation, trying to get things out, affecting people's opinions. At a high level, I would say tackling those two differently or separately. In terms of the cyber threat, we knew the cyber threats real from all of our adversaries: Russia, China, Iran. They go anywhere from using off-the-shelf open source tools to sophisticated tools and operations. Like many people saw our release of Drovo Rub. We've seen a lot of news about supply chain attacks. All of those countries have intelligence objectives, trying to do cyber intrusions to gain information for their own needs. And we saw a lot of broad cyber targeting. And I'm sure Matt might have something to chime in on here. But for 2020, we didn't really see any activity that would suggest that there's an effort to modify votes or disrupt election infrastructure. On the influence side, I know we'll be talking about this a bit, but we did see activity from multiple adversaries. Russia still at it in terms of using different proxies. In terms of real people, covert influence platforms, in order to try to get their narratives out. People like Andrei Derkach in Ukraine, which we can talk about more moving forward. On the China side, they were a bit more indirect, right? They are doing more issue-based topics like COVID-19, civil unrest. They didn't have as much of a direct approach in terms of election influence, like compared to Russia and China, Russia and Iran. And then Iran was very active in the space as well. I think the glaring example was in October, what we call a perception hack, in terms of them trying to do voter intimidation and convince people that the vote had been hacked. So at a high level, that's how I would characterize what we saw in 2020.
Matt, since Dave called you out.
Yeah, I agree completely with Dave. I mean, we saw the ongoing effort by the Russian government and Russian actors to undermine confidence in the process, to continue to target Americans, to divide them, to cause distrust and really sow confusion. The Iranian example is a really good one that Dave referenced. We saw them take and use voter registration data, some of which was exposed by a state, and then target voters using the data that they were able to obtain. So using emails and even phone numbers, target voters with intimidation, posing to be the Proud Boys, suggesting that they knew how people were voting and that there would be consequences if you voted a certain way, all geared towards, again, really causing confusion, sowing distrust, getting us at each other's throat, and in this case, causing fear. And hopefully we'll get to talk about the federal response to that Iranian activity, because I think it speaks to the broader effort that we have to respond to these attempts to undermine confidence, not just in elections, but in our democratic institutions as a whole.
Maggie?
Sorry, can you frame the question?
So we're just summarizing what we saw in the 2020 election with respect to foreign interference and influence.
Yeah, I'm afraid Masterson and Imbordino are going to have much more insight into that than I personally do as far as the actual interference. But definitely, I would say, yeah, I don't think I'm the person to ask on that one. I'm more focused on machines, and what I can just see as a citizen was mostly domestic.
Okay. SJ?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of domestic stuff. So a lot of the interference was really stuff that happened years ago, bearing fruit. I think Matt and Dave have covered most of what was actually outside, but we the jury is still out on some things like Parlay. But most of what we tracked was domestic that had been created a long time ago.
And Harri.
I think this 2020 really underlines something what we in the security community has been talking over a decade, which is that the system, it's not enough that the system can defend itself and try to make certain that there's transparency, but also the system has to be able to defend itself against the false claims of malicious activity. And the democracy is all about the peaceful transition of power, as we said, and the winners will always accept the results. So elections really, and election security really is about convincing the losing parties and the support of losing ideas that the election was fair and square. So it's impossible to prove negative. And this is the one which has been exploited in influence operations, both domestic and foreign, and attribution is very difficult. We don't necessarily know whether the attacker is truly domestic or truly outsider. But we really have to look into the transparency aspect of proving that the system is able to prove false claims of hack and disprove those.
So let's take that back down. Maggie, I know that you volunteered as a poll worker, right? How did that play out at that local level with their understanding or their concerns about what was happening up at a much higher strategic level?
Well, I would say that the concerns were perhaps not quite at the foreign interference level. COVID was really dominating everybody's mind, much more than that. I would say that it was a credit, at least to my precinct, to my ward rather, that they were the care that was taken and the way the community rose to the challenge of the inrush of mail-in voting due to COVID fears. And I kind of would have encouraged anybody who thought that, really a lot of the angst was around, the increase in mail-in voting as a result of COVID and whether or not that would favor one partisan group or the other. And I would encourage anybody who has those fears to volunteer as a poll worker, because you would see the care that goes into making sure that there aren't things like people voting twice. Some of the most ludicrous claims around that were like that if 200, ballots came into our ward, we'd just count all of them. And that's just simply not the truth. What happens is you take in a ballot, you check the name of the person off the list, and were there to be someone else who came in later in person, for example, and said, "Hi, I want to vote," and we said, "I'm sorry, you're already checked off the list," there would be an investigation. And the only, I think, instance where they even came close to that was a woman mailed in her ballot, wasn't sure it was received on time, came in to vote to make sure it had come in, and then voted in person because it had not, in fact, come in yet. And that was, and if the ballot had been received later, it would not have been counted. So there was a lot of confusion around that. But again, around fears of interference, fears of malfeasance, but a lot of it was springing from measures made for COVID more than like a fear of Russian interference.
Matt?
Yeah, Maggie raises a really interesting point. And first, Maggie, thanks for being a poll worker and serving. It's the best way to learn the process and really understand it. And I know how long you've been working on these issues. From my perspective, just kind of looking at the ability for, in this conversation, our adversaries to, really target the process and undermine confidence, understanding what played out this year and the opportunities that existed. We went into this election, there was already conversation around the security concerns coming out of 2016 about what steps have been taken to secure the process. And then, we have a global pandemic, which led state and local election officials to have to make tough decisions about how to serve their voters. And that included expanded vote by mail, expanded in-person early voting, changes to the timing of the way ballots were processed. And all of that led to a lot of questions and confusion for voters about how am I going to interact with the process? How will my vote be counted? And you saw election
thinking about examples.
This meeting is
One
being
of the foreign
recorded.
interferences we haven't spoken about is the Spanish language interference. So we had Spanish language interference in Hispanic communities in places like Florida. And it's kind of missed off the list. A lot of it was radio. So it was false content. So it was misinformation. But a lot of it was aimed at changing behavior, changing attitudes towards.
Matt?
Yeah, just SJ raises, I think, the definitionally the importance here in that there was, as